So when I realize what I really desire is union with God, and my desire gets reoriented in that way, now I'm free. Now I'm free to appreciate beauty in this world rightly. And I'm free, whether that beauty comes my way or not, I can still rejoice because I'm not expecting ultimate fulfillment from the things of this world.
Hey, a couple of weeks ago, I had on the program Bishop Eric Varden from Norway. He's bishop and a monk. And honestly, it was just a beautiful conversation, one of my favorite shows in a long, long time. And today, if you like that show, you're going to love this one. We got Christopher West, world-renowned expert on the theology of the body, talking about his brand new book called Eating the Sunrise. If you want a free autographed copy of the book, just become one of the first 10 supporters on Patreon following this program, and he will send you a hand-autographed, personally written book straight to your house. And so just go to the show notes, patreon.com/Jason Everett, to become one of the first 10 patrons. For those of you who already support the program, thank you guys so much. We're almost at 100 episodes, and you guys are the ones that have made that possible. And so I just want to extend big debt of gratitude towards you, and want to invite you, all the patrons and everybody else listening, to our pilgrimage we've got coming up soon with Father Agostino Torres over to Italy. Father Agostino is also going to be bringing 4 or 5 Franciscan friars of his to come with us. And we're going to be going to Assisi, to Rome. We'll have a papal audience, get to go down to the Scavi tour under St. Peter's Basilica, visit the catacombs. One of the places I'm most looking forward to, the tomb of St. John Paul II, spending some time there. So if you want to come, bring your family, your spouse, girlfriend, fiance, whatever, grandkids. Registration's still open. Just go to chastity.com. You'll see the pop-up ad for the pilgrimage. Click it, sign up. It's going to be in the middle of January, but you're not going to want to miss this opportunity. So we'd love to have you on the pilgrimage. But without further ado, I know you're going to enjoy today's show with Christopher West. Christopher, awesome to have you back on the show, brother. Always a blessing just to see you and hear you.
Thanks, my brother. And you have been in my heart for so long. We see each other occasionally at events together, but brother, you're such a good man, doing such good work, and I'm so happy to be part of your show and to talk to your audience about this new book.
Well, congratulations on it. Tell us the origin of it. I always say with anybody who asks me, my book's kind of like necessity is the mother of invention. So you always feel this ache that's missing out there that you want to fill. So tell us about the new book, where it came from, what the goal is with it.
This was my COVID book. This was lockdown book.
Yeah.
And I finished it actually like a year and a half ago. But so many other things were going on in my life, and we had another book that we had to put out, a retreat from JP2 called God is Beauty that we launched a year ago, and finally this book is out. So it was born from, I think I even sent this to you. I got so excited about this. I did send it to you. An article by Timothy Petitsis. This article on chastity.
Yeah.
I read that. He's an Orthodox theologian from the Eastern Church. And I read it maybe 5-6 years ago. I sent it to you pretty soon thereafter. I said, Jason, you got to read this. This guy's onto it. He brings all his Eastern wisdom and mojo to it all. And it's inspired me so deeply. I sat with it in prayer for several months, maybe even a couple years. And it started to take me to a new place in my own thinking and understanding, a deeper place. And I said, I just have to write what I've been reflecting on for these last few years. That was the origin story of this book. I was getting confused in my brain there. A phrase that I heard from C.S. Lewis, that he was with book, like born, you conceive it. He was with book and then gave birth to it. And I said, I had birth and book in my mind. So I said, Burke.
Yeah, there you go. Well, it's funny you bring him up of the article that you had shared with me, because what I wanted to do today is kind of pepper you with 9 or 10 quotes that I read in the book, and just give you the quote either that you said or someone else said, and then just let you wax eloquent, kind of expound on that. And the first one that I pulled out of there was his quote, "Beauty is the only thing that can keep the eye chaste." This was one of my favorite lines, because it's such a stumble. Like, wait a minute, no, beauty's the thing that causes you to have unchaste eyes. What are you talking about? Beauty is the only thing that can keep the eye chaste. So go off.
Yeah, beauty is the only thing that can keep the eye chaste. What are we talking about here? Oftentimes we get stuck on finite beauty and we latch on expecting it to fulfill our yearning for the infinite, right? And this is where the icon degenerates into an idol. All of created beauty, especially the beauty of the human body, is designed by God to be an icon that opens a window to heaven. That's what eros, or erotic longing, at its deepest point is. It is a longing for heaven, for infinite joy, for infinite goodness, for infinite beauty, for the marriage of the Lamb. And all of creation tells that story, pointing us to that eternal union. That's what beauty is. But when we latch on to small b beauty and we don't let it lead us to capital B beauty, that's when we get in trouble. But the solution to getting in trouble with the icons of beauty all around us is not to shut down our yearning for beauty, but to continue on the pilgrimage. And here I quote the Catechism: the journey of the Christian life is the journey from the sign to the reality signified. That's what he's getting at. He's saying only beauty, only that pilgrimage of beauty. Let's put it that way. Only staying on the pilgrimage of beauty, from small b beauty to capital B beauty, from the sign to the reality signified, only that can keep me chaste. Because chastity, as the Catechism says, is a promise of immortality. You've heard me say it 100 times. Chaste eros is the rocket fuel that launches us towards the stars. That's the same idea.
And it ties in well to something you mentioned there, that when we do encounter beauty, we can kind of have one of three reactions. We can idolize it, despise it, or liturgize it. So tell me a little bit about each of those three potential options that we sometimes take when we encounter beauty.
Yes, so we've talked about idolize. Idolize means I see something beautiful in this world and I latch on and I expect it to be God for me. In other words, I expect it to be my ultimate happiness and fulfillment. That's what God is. St. Augustine says, when we say the word God, what we mean as Christians is, you are everything I desire. You are everything I want, right? So think of what Jesus says at the beginning of the Gospel of John. What do you want? What are you looking for, right? We got to get in touch with our desires. When we latch on to created beauty and think it's God, think it's ultimate fulfillment, that's the idol. When we do that, we get in trouble, right? We wound ourselves, we wound other people, and it hurts. You know, when you launch your rocket with inverted engines, it's going to backfire. You're going to crash and burn. And then we make the tragic mistake of getting angry at ourselves, angry at our desires, angry at the beautiful things in this world. And we can even come to despise the good and beautiful things of this world because they've gotten us in trouble, right? It's the classic casting of blame, like Adam in the garden. It's the woman. It's her. That's the reason this whole thing happened, right? It's because you're so beautiful that I'm lusting, right? No, it's because of lust in your heart that you're lusting, not because of her beauty that you're lusting, right? Don't cast the blame. Don't despise the beautiful things of this world because of your abuse of them, right? So the third option, idolize, despise. The third option, the only one that can really set us free, is to liturgize. And what do I mean by that? Turning that hunger into a prayer. Well, what does that mean? That sounds kind of hyper pious, Christopher. What are you getting at? Prayer, the fathers of the church tell us, and here I quote Pope Benedict XVI, prayer is nothing other than becoming a longing for God. Where those rocket engines get redirected towards what I really desire. And so this chapter on chastity in my book is called Open Wide Your Mouth and I Will Fill It. That's the liturgy. That's exactly what we do in the liturgy. We go to God with our hunger, we open wide our mouth, and he fills it with himself. That's what I mean in basic terms by idolize, despise, or liturgize.
It reminds me of that helpful analogy I remember hearing you once say of, God's plan for human love and sexuality is like this masterpiece painting, and then it got crumpled up, and then someone saw it in the gutter. Can you share that analogy? Because I found that to be particularly helpful.
Yeah. I could even, here, let me see if I have I need my piece of paper. Here we go. I got a piece of paper here. So I say, imagine this is the most beautiful painting you've ever seen in your life, right? What is it? It's man and woman naked without shame. And it is the most beautiful painting we can possibly imagine. God created us naked without shame to reveal in this world, in and through male and femaleness, the union that we are destined for, the holy communion that we are destined for in what Scripture calls the marriage of the Lamb. This is the main icon of the marriage of the Lamb. And that's why the enemy hates this painting. And with original sin, the painting got terribly twisted up. And here's our choices. We can idolize this. We can get all fixated on this distorted picture of human sexuality, which is pornography, right? That's idolize. Or we can look at this and we think it's trash, and so we throw it away. That's despise. Or we can say, Lord, here I am in my brokenness, in my twisted, messed up humanity. Let your redeeming love come into this just as I am. And then look what happens. The painting gets more and more uncrumpled, and we rediscover who we really are. That's liturgize.
And one of the things that you mentioned in the book is what gives us the capacity to move into liturgizing. You say that the virtue of chastity or purity of heart is what enables us to reclaim the human body and the entire physical world as theophany. Now, obviously, theophany is not an average word you use every day. Yeah. What does that mean, and why does purity of heart enable us to see not only other people and their bodies, but all of the created universe as theophany?
Yeah, if I could summarize this whole book in one word, it is theophany. Theophany comes from two Greek words. It's a word more familiar to the Eastern Church, to the Eastern Christian tradition than it is in the West. Theophanes, if I don't know how to pronounce Greek, but it means to reveal God. And when we have a theophany, we're having an experience in creation, through the beauty of creation, of God's beauty, right? One of my favorite examples of theophany, maybe you know this video, Jason. It was one of the original viral videos on YouTube like 15, 16 years ago.
Yes, Double Rainbow?
The double rainbow guy.
He's awesome. Love that guy.
Double rainbow guy, where he sees this double rainbow and his heart is just thrust through with beauty, and he moans, he groans, he starts to cry. When he cries, it starts to rain as if God were crying with him, right? Yeah. That's theophany. When small b beauty leads us to capital B beauty. And I'll never forget, he made his rounds on the talk shows back then. Yeah. You know, this video was so famous. I think it got like, 50 million views in 3 weeks or something. Yeah. And I think 1 million of those views were from me.
Yeah.
But when he was on the talk shows, they would always ask him something like this, what were you smoking?
Yeah.
And he would always say, I was not high on any foreign substance. I was high, he said, on God's beauty.
Yep.
High theophany. And only theophany can make our eyes and our hearts chaste. Chastity, as I say in the book, is not a closing of our eyes to beauty, right? And sure enough, on the road of growing in purity, there is absolutely a place for gaining custody of your eyes and avoiding the occasion of sin, right? That's just classic, Chastity 101. That's where we all start. But as we mature, it's not a matter of turning away or closing down or shutting down or closing our eyes. It's a matter of expanding our eyes and our hearts to the widest capacity, which is theophany. This is why they were naked without shame in the beginning, because they saw their nakedness as a theophany, as a revelation of divine beauty. Now, none of us are there 100% in this life, and none of us will ever be there 100% in this life. I know, it's a battle. But we mature. We can experience, as St. Paul says, the power of redemption at work in us is capable of doing far more than we think or imagine.
Yeah,
There's another way to see. There's another way to experience the beauty of this world in a way that can launch us to the heavens.
Yeah, and it seems to almost come naturally when we see created beauty in the world, but we kind of get a hiccup with the human body. So like we just did a wilderness backpacking retreat this summer. On the final day, we witnessed a triple rainbow. And it was just like, we started quoting, like, what does it mean? And like, it just evokes such immediate joy and even laughter of just the astonishment. But so it's almost natural. We can see God's handprint on that. But when it comes to the human form, we recoil because we're afraid, like John Paul talked about this hermeneutic of suspicion that we sometimes have. But it's funny you had mentioned this quote because I was planning on saying next. You said chastity in its more mature form then is not a closing of our eyes to earthly beauty, but an opening of our eyes to their widest capacity so that the earthly beauty leads the heart to be ravished by heavenly beauty, but lust involves a loss of that vision. And so instead of lust being you're seeing too much, lust is kind of a reduction of our vision. It's a narrowing, in a sense, of our gaze down to merely the physical. And that's why what Adam and Eve originally had was not a naivete, or I didn't see that, I didn't even realize you're naked. It had this wideness of vision, that it was an ability to see the theophany. And so maybe explain that why lust narrows that vision down a little bit.
Yeah, lust narrows our vision down to the merely physically sensible, right? I zoom in on the body divorced from the dignity of the person, right? This is interesting. I got an email from somebody who's listened to my stuff and watched my videos a week ago. And he said, Christopher, do you still have sexual desire for your wife? And I heard his question. What he was saying was, when you journey on this road of purity, do your sexual desires go away? And I was like, no, become more intense because they get linked to the beauty of the person, right? My attraction to my wife is not merely an attraction to a body, some naked body. My attraction is to my nakedness of my wife as a person, right? Mm-hmm. There's an integration that happens of body and soul. You know this quote as well as I, Jason, from the Catechism, that chastity involves a coming together, an integration of body and soul, such that sexuality and spirituality are no longer two separate realities, but they come together. Do you know that direct quote from the Catechism? I know I have it in my chapter here.
Yeah, I don't have it by heart, but I know what you're talking about, the integration, that key word.
Here it is. Chastity, this is right out of the Catechism. Chastity means the successful integration of sexuality within the person, and thus the inner unity of man in his bodily and spiritual being. Right? That's right out of the Catechism. And what happens as that integration takes place, and not that we ever arrive, we can never say, I'm 100% there, but the more that integration happens, the more we come to see integral beauty. Lust is disintegrated. It sees merely the sensual, doesn't even tap into this deeper kind of beauty, the invisible beauty of the person. And we have to avoid another error here. We're not saying chastity is to side merely for invisible beauty and cast physical beauty aside. No. That's still disintegrated, right? Whether you are zooming in on the physical to the neglect of the spiritual, or you're zooming in on the spiritual to the neglect of the physical, either one is disintegrated. Chaste eros, chaste erotic desire, involves this integration where physical beauty becomes the doorway to a much deeper, richer beauty, never casting physical beauty aside, but recognizing it's a sign of a much richer beauty, a much deeper beauty. That's chaste appreciation of beauty. Lustful appreciation of beauty, which is really a depreciation of beauty, is a grasping on to the merely physical for my own selfish pleasure, such that I wound the very person I'm attracted to, and I wound myself.
It ties in perfectly one of the quotes you mentioned where he said, mature chastity is mature sensuality. And
yes.
People, it's like, no. that those should have like a master-servant relationship, that the master is chastity, the sensuality is the servant, as long as you're keeping it in check. And you're saying no more than you're saying that, yes, then you've got mature chastity. But this concept of mature sensuality, I don't think a lot of people considered the richness of what you're saying there, that mature sensuality is chaste. Dive into that.
Sure. So I'll just quote Pope Benedict XVI from Spirit of the Liturgy. We are not, as Christians, to disregard our senses. The goal is not some angelistic approach where we reject the body and the senses. Rather, Pope Benedict says, we are to expand our senses to their widest capacity. And if we learn to do that, then let's just take the sense of smell, right? You love the smell of coffee. You love the smell of flowers. You love the smell of a crackling campfire, whatever it is. Allow that physical, sensual experience to expand your sense of smell. And eventually you get to a point where you pass over from the physical senses to what the tradition calls the mystical senses. And so you start to have a kind of mystical or spiritual sense of smell. You can smell spiritual realities, and it's hard even to put into words, but you can smell the difference between chaste beauty or a chaste appreciation of beauty and a lustful depreciation of beauty. And one smells like glory and the other smells like sulfur. And you can do that with each of your senses, like the sense of hearing. Expand your sense of hearing to its widest capacity, and you will pass over and you will start to hear in the song of a bird, in the whisper of the wind, even in a banal pop song on the radio. It will take you to mystical heights. I mean, this sounds silly, but I often use this example. When I was a teenager, the song by Def Leppard called Pour Some Sugar on Me got me in a lot of trouble, right? And there was a time when I came to faith in the early 90s, like I needed to purge my music collection because all that music just reminded me of a lot of debauchery in my teenage years. But as I've matured, the very songs that once got me in trouble, right? The very songs that once got me in trouble, they get uncrumpled. And Pour Some Sugar on Me. When I hear that song now randomly on the radio, I hear the Song of Songs. I hear the lover in the Song of Songs telling his beloved that she's like sweet nectar, right? Yeah. And he wants to taste the sweet nectar under her tongue, and he wants that sweet nectar to be poured all over him. That's what I hear. And what I'm reminded of is what St. Paul says, to the pure, all things are pure. But to the impure, nothing is pure.
Yeah. Even the songs becomes an occasion of sin.
Exactly. Even the Song of Songs becomes pornographic if you're impure. Mm-hmm. But to the degree that we experience purity, you can hear Pour Some Sugar on Me by Def Leppard. And of course it's twisted up, but with your spiritual senses, what do you recognize? You recognize the original good thing that is in there that got twisted up. And purity of heart allows you to uncrumple it to see the good that's still in there. And you've heard me say this probably many times, but it bears repeating. This is basic bedrock Catholic cosmology, right? The devil doesn't have his own clay. Don't give the devil his own clay. All he can do is take God's good clay and twist it up, right? Redemption is not throwing that twisted clay away. Redemption is allowing Christ to come into what's twisted up to untwist it, right? That's the journey.
I remember when I did the interview with Bishop Eric Varden a couple weeks ago.
Oh, I loved it.
Finished that. I kicked that over to you, but it reminded me of one of the things that he said in there about this elderly priest when he was a younger priest, was walking in Rome, came back to the house of that, and he was just delighted because he had seen this beautiful woman on the street, and he said he just wanted to applaud when he saw her. Kind of the word that came to mind for me is that what happens with lust is we get kind of snagged on the beauty. We kind of get stuck on it. But because of that priest's purity of heart, he was able to pass straight through her beauty and just authentically delight in it and actually just move on in his day in that spirit of gratitude. And you had mentioned in the book, you said chaste eros is always traveling upstream toward beauty's source, allowing the stream of created beauty to flow without demanding more from it than it can provide. And I think that's the challenge right there, because we think all these are beautiful theological concepts, but how do we do that? How do we keep from getting kind of snagged on the beauty itself and kind of stuck on it, kind of like this little pool on the side of a river that turns into like a little cesspool because it just can't through.
Great image. Oh, I love that image, Jason. That's the powerful image, because that's exactly what happens. When you get off into that little pool on the side, it stagnates. It becomes a cesspool. Fish die. There's no life in there.
Yeah.
We see that salmon that travels upstream to beauty's source. And let me just tell you a story that I hope will give some real practical application here. This was 25, 30 years ago. I'm in graduate school. I am at the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception in Washington, D.C. I'm at Mass, and there's this woman a few pews ahead of me who had beautiful red hair. And I'm a sucker for red hair. I don't know what it is. I've always found redheads quite attractive. And she stood up. This is like right before the Eucharistic prayer, when everybody stands up. She stood up and she just flicked her hair over her shoulder. And I was like, boom, like this arrow just pierced me. And I'm trying to enter into the Eucharistic prayer, and I'm distracted by this woman's beauty. Well, I know enough at this point in my life that beauty, the beauty of a woman, is meant to be an icon that is meant to take me deeper into what the liturgy is, right? What is the liturgy? The liturgy is the consummation of the marriage between Christ and the church. And the whole mystery of human sexuality, rightly understood, it's a sign that's meant to lead us to the Mass. That's what it is. This is what St. Paul is saying when he says the union of man and woman in one flesh is a great mystery, and it refers to the union of Christ and the church, right? The holy communion of man and woman is meant to point us to the holy communion of the Eucharist. That's what happens when this paper gets uncrumpled. But there I was at Mass, distracted by the flick of this woman's red hair. Instead of shutting down the journey, instead of shutting down my attraction, I have to allow myself, by God's grace, because this is exactly where God wants to take us, but we have to let him take us there. We have to travel upstream through created beauty to uncreated beauty, to the source of that beauty. And there I was. I said, Lord, man, I'm so attracted to this woman's red hair. Take me through the Mass to what I'm really desiring. And all of a sudden, as I allowed a certain purification of the desire, as I surrendered it to the Lord, this woman's beauty became like a window through which I started to understand and see the entire Basilica of the Immaculate Conception as the beauty of Mary's womb. And I realized what it was about to happen on that altar was a sacramental representation of what happened in Mary's womb, the incarnation. And I had one of the most powerful experiences of the liturgy of my entire life that day, because I allowed, I'm not patting myself on the back here, I'm saying thank you, God, for that grace that came into my heart to help me travel upstream to the source of her beauty. Her beauty is an invitation to pilgrimage. Her beauty is not the destination. It's an invitation to the destination, which is the beauty of the Lord and the beauty of the liturgy and the union of Christ and the church. That's what we really desire.
And I think the power of this approach is that so many people have been told, like, yeah, I know you really crave beauty, but you can't have it. You know, it's just not moral to have that beauty, when the natural inkling when you see something beautiful is to ache to be united with it. And obviously, you're not called to be united with it in an inappropriate way. But when the response is like, nope, can't have it, just shut it down, keep that in check. You mentioned there, you said it is an illusion to think we can have beauty on non-crucified terms. And so the implication is here is like, wait a minute, so you're saying we can have beauty, but then what are these crucified, terms that you're talking about?
Yeah, it's an illusion to think we can have beauty on non-crucified terms means the pilgrimage from the sign to the reality signified passes by way of the death and resurrection of Jesus. And I say in the book, if I can find, oh, here it is. I just opened to the exact page. Thank you, Lord. This is kind of a summary of the book. There are 3 main points of the book, and the book is called Eating the Sunrise. And that's an image for us of what happens, just as you said, Jason. We want to take beauty into ourselves, right? We want to eat it. And a student of mine once said to me, Christopher, I don't want to just behold a beautiful sunrise. I want to eat it. And that always stayed with me. And I called him up. I said, hey, I want to name my book after what you told me all those years ago. Is that okay? And he said, yeah, sure. So that's where I got the title Eating the Sunrise. But here are the 3 main points that I'm making in the book. Number 1, we are made by God to slake our thirst at the fountain of infinite beauty. That's why we exist. We all have a thirst for a beauty that lasts. Another name for that is infinite beauty. Another name for that is God, right? Mm-hmm. We are made to slake our thirst at the fountain of infinite beauty. That's point number 1. Point number 2, finite beauty, the beauty of this world, the beauty of the human body, is but a sign or a theophany of infinite beauty. Point number 3, and this answers your question, to reach that everlasting beauty with a capital B, we must pass over from the sign to the reality signified through a dying with Christ that promises a glorious rising. What is the dying? St. Paul says we must allow our sinful passions to be crucified. Why? So we end up having no passions? No. So our passions can be resurrected in a rightly oriented way. But that means, let me go back to that example of that redheaded woman at Mass all those years ago. My disordered desire wanted to latch on to her beauty right then and there. I wanted to take it to myself and treat her as an object for my pleasure. That's what lust is. I must die. I must allow that inclination to be crucified. And what happens? Death leads to resurrection, and the desire gets rightly oriented and opens you up to infinite glory. That's the journey of the Christian life. And your senses don't get squashed. They get expanded to their widest capacity. Your eyes don't close. They get wide open to theophany everywhere. That's the journey.
Yeah, and so it's almost as if we have 2 roads before us, at least from a man's perspective. You can either conquer a woman for the sake of yourself or conquer yourself for the sake of the woman. And
well said.
And what is the deepest craving? Like, what's the real desire? I think we all know what we think we desire, but you'd mentioned in the book, no one is so free as the person who desires what he truly desires. Unpack that for us.
Yeah. Okay, there I am again in that church. I think I desire the beauty of that woman as some ultimate satisfaction. I am wrong. That's not what I really desire. That woman is a sign of what I really desire. And I must go on the journey from the sign to the thing signified. That's the journey of the Christian life. That's the journey of prayer. That's the journey of the sacraments. That's what the liturgy is. The liturgy, at its very essence, is meant to orient our deepest yearning and hunger towards the bread come down from heaven, right? So the journey, if I shut it down, then Christianity will get reduced to a pious practice of following what seem like arbitrary rules, right? It will become rigoristic. It will become legalistic. If I go on the pilgrimage from the sign to the reality signified, now the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ becomes a living reality in my experience. I experience the death and I experience the resurrection. Now I am living the Christian life, not as a theory, not as some list of rules to follow, but as a living encounter with the risen Jesus Christ, who has a real impact on the way I see a tree, on the way I eat a meal, on the way I behold a woman, on the way I love my wife and my kids, on the way I listen to a song on the radio, on the way I watch a movie. Everything gets affected, impacted because of the encounter with the risen Christ. And Jason, I went on some tangent and I don't remember your question. And I don't know if I've answered it. What was your question?
No, I'd say you did, because the question was about no one is as free as the person who desires what he truly desires.
Exactly. So when I realize that it's not that woman in front of me that I ultimately desire, but what I really desire is union with God, and my desire gets reoriented in that way, now I'm free. Now I'm free to appreciate beauty in this world rightly. And I'm free, whether that beauty comes my way or not, I can still rejoice because I'm not expecting ultimate fulfillment from the things of this world. St. Paul says this very well. I have learned the secret of life, he says. I know how to live in abundance and I know how to live in scarcity. Why? Because when I'm living in abundance and I'm drinking good wine and enjoying good food, I see this as a sign of the heavenly banquet. When times are scarce and I don't have good wine and I don't have good food and I'm eating measly bits of bread, well, I'm not despondent because I'm not placing my fulfillment in the things of this world, right? I know the treasure is the Lord and he's promised himself to me. And so I'm free. No man is so free as the one who desires what he really desires. But if you're mistaken in your desire, if you think the pleasures of this world are what you really want, you're going to live a life of misery. You're going to live a life of addiction, and you're going to live a life of despair. Why do I say addiction and despair? Can I show you a little image here that makes my point?
Yeah.
All right. This is a painting. Have you ever seen this painting, Jason?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a painting my daughter did, and she calls it, based on my teaching, she calls it the 3 choices of Eros, right? Repress, indulge, redeem. The stoic, the addict, the aspiring mystic. Despise, idolize, or liturgize. All the same concept, right?
Yeah.
This guy is an addict. Why? Because he's aiming his desire for infinite joy at finite pleasure, right? And so I go and I get that finite pleasure. Does it satisfy yet? Does it satisfy me? No. So what do I think I need? If I get a finite joy and it doesn't satisfy me, what do I think I need?
You need more.
I need more. More. So I go and I get more. Does it satisfy me yet?
Yeah, you must need more. You haven't had enough.
I just need more and more and more. That's addiction, right?
Yeah.
Here's a theological definition of addiction. Addiction happens when we aim our desire for God at anything less than God.
Yeah.
We become addicted to that thing. But look how close the addict is to the aspiring mystic. St. Augustine said it very well. He said, those who are lost in their passions, like this guy, are less lost than those who have lost their passions, like this guy. Because the first step in the Christian life is to get in touch with my hunger.
Yeah.
The addict is aiming his hunger in the wrong direction, but at least he feels his hunger.
Yeah.
And this is why the sinners and the prostitutes came running to Jesus before the Pharisees, who had repressed their hearts and reduced everything to a list of rules to follow. Only those who are in touch with their hunger know that the gospel is good news, because the gospel is an invitation to a wedding feast.
Yeah, it's interesting how close those 2 images are. It's just a matter of cropping and rotating, and you've got the same thing. I met a high school boy maybe a week or 2 ago, came up after the Chastity talk, and he had said that, he's, experienced same-sex attractions his whole life, but he's really indulged in them and lived an extremely promiscuous life with other guys. And he had this unbelievable, beautiful conversion. And he was just radiant with just the love of God. I mean, you can see it from a mile away in this kid. And he said, what hit me, he said, I realized one day that I'm worshiping human flesh. I said, do you realize how close that is to your calling? of Eucharistic adoration. That you're not called to worship the flesh of a man that you've made into God, but you're called to worship the flesh of a God who became man. That it's so close to everything that you've been called to do. There you go. That's it.
what it is. That's eating the sunrise.
Yep. And the boy, like he saw it. You could just see just how much more alive he was and happy because now he was finally desiring what he desired. And you shared in the book, you had mentioned that this book has the ability, you said that to show the roots of today's gender confusion and the hope of overcoming it. So pivoting just a little bit to the topic of, who we're attracted to, who we identify as perhaps. How does this concept and the things that you're proposing here have the ability to look at the roots of the gender confusion and then the hope of overcoming this?
Yeah, I think the roots of the gender confusion are in the despising of the body. And the despising of the body comes inevitably as the rotten fruit of idolizing the body. Put it this way, we will eventually despise whatever we idolize, right?
Mm-hmm.
The sexual revolution began with idolizing the sexual difference and the pleasure it can afford, right?
Mm-hmm.
But whenever you idolize something, eventually you're going to hate it because it can never give you what you hoped or thought it would, right? Then when you go to the level from idolizing to despising, you're in a culture that we're in today where men hate their genitals to the point that they're chopping them off under anesthesia on an operating table. Women hate their breasts to the point that they are chopping them off on an operating table, right? That's a despising of the body that is the fruit of having idolized the body. So today's gender confusion is the fallout of our parents and grandparents idolizing the body. The only cure for idolizing and despising the body is what I call liturgizing the body.
Mm-hmm.
And the story you just told sums up the whole thing.
Yeah.
Where that young man who had been worshiping human flesh in homosexual encounters discovers what he's really looking for is to worship the flesh of the Son of God and to take it into himself, right? I once heard the homosexual impulse described as a cannibal compulsion because cannibals only want to eat the people they admire.
Yeah.
And they want to eat the people they admire because they believe they will acquire their traits by eating them.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What we really desire, take the homosexual distortion and uncrumple it.
Yeah.
What does that young man want? He wants to take in to himself the flesh of Jesus Christ to acquire his traits so that he can become the true man he is meant to be.
Yeah, because there's this ache. What is it that you see in that man that you do not see in yourself that you wish to take on? Yeah. And it's the God man that can actually tap into what it is that you actually lack and were created to become and can ultimately give it to you. So, man, Chris, there's so much more that we could go into, but how can people get a hold of the book? I know that there's a sample or a bonus chapter they can get at the website, eatingthesunrise.com. But
eatingthesunrise.com. You can get all the bonus stuff there, the bonus chapter, but you can go to Amazon or wherever you buy books, Eating the Sunrise. And Jason, I just want to say, you and I are smoking from the same mystical pipe because there's just such a great back and forth and we're tracking with each other so well. And we've always known that about each other. You're going to mention later about the giveaway. I'm going to sign and give away 10 free books. So
yeah, we're going to mention that outro of the show where you can go to get 10 free copies personally signed to you from Christopher. And in terms of ordering the book, we will put a link in the bottom of the show notes so that you're not scrambling around online or just going to Amazon. We'll give you the link that can help obviously best support Christopher and his ministry. And if people want to connect with you, TOB Institute, tell people how they can do that so that if they don't just get a book, they can go to like an immersion course, a retreat.
Yeah.
BlackRock, tell a little bit about where people can go for a much deeper dive than a 45 minute cast.
Yeah, go to tobforfree.com, FOR free, tobforfree.com. We will send you 3 free sessions to our introductory course at the Theology of the Body Institute. You can dip your toe in there. Of course, you can watch our YouTube channel, Theology of the Body Institute YouTube channel. We have hundreds of videos there. My wife and I just recorded our 260th episode of our podcast,
Wow.
The Christopher West Show. So you can dip in there too.
Awesome. And trust me, once you dip a toe in, you're going to want to go off the high dive and go. And so, Christopher, thank you for your work, for your ministry. And I just, again, invite all our listeners to please, before you finish listening to the podcast, or as soon as you do, offer a Hail Mary for Christopher, his family, and the fruitfulness of the work, and all of the people to whom that he's going to be speaking, that the hearts would just be wide open to receive this fire hydrant, of grace and of content that can transform their lives. So, Christopher, God bless you. God bless the family. And thank you for coming on. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the show. And as Christopher mentioned, if you want a free copy of his book, autographed and signed to you, the special offer is the first 10 people to sign up after this show on Patreon to support the podcast will get a free autographed copy. So if you just go to patreon.com/Jason Everett, you can support the show. And then again, a reminder, if you want, there's still time to come on the pilgrimage in mid-January to Italy and Rome with Father Agostino and myself to have some good pasta, good prayers. Not going to want to miss it. Hope to see you there. God bless.